Have you ever heard a story that just felt, I don't know, a little flat? You know, like you got the basic facts, but you totally missed the feeling, the meaning, the why behind it all. Well, today we're going to dive into a super powerful tool that takes those flat, thin stories and makes them rich and meaningful and deep. It's called thick description, and honestly, it might just change the way you see everything. Let's get into it. So to really get what thick description is, we first have to look at what it isn't. And we're going to start with a story, a really, really short one. And as you see it, I just want you to ask yourself one simple question. What's missing here? What don't I know? Okay, here it is. The teacher raised her voice. That's it. That's the entire story. Now, it's a fact, for sure. But does it actually tell you anything? Is she angry? Is she excited? Is she trying to get a rowdy class to pay attention? Or maybe she's calling for help? We are left with so many more questions than answers. And this is what we call a thin description. So how do we fix this? Well, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start by defining what thick description actually is. Then we'll break down its key ingredients. After that, we'll see why it's so incredibly valuable, learn how to do it ourselves, and then wrap it all up with the one big takeaway. All right, let's move on and really put some meat on these bones. What in the world is thick description? Okay, so let's go back to our thin little story. The teacher raised her voice. Now, what if we added some context? What if we said, in a classroom silenced by weeks of passive resistance, the teacher raised her voice, signaling a sudden shift in the power dynamic? Whoa. Suddenly, we don't just have an action, we've got drama. We have history. We have tension, a whole struggle for control. That right there is the power of thickness. And here's the crucial point. Thick description isn't just about throwing in more adjectives. It's a whole method. It's about giving us that deep, contextual detail to explain not just what happened, but the cultural and social meaning behind it. It's the difference between just reporting an event and actually interpreting its significance. So the goal really is to turn these little isolated stories into, as the source material puts it, contextually grounded, meaning-rich interpretations. It's an invitation for us to understand, not just to watch from the sidelines. So how do we actually build a description this rich? What are the secret ingredients? Well, it turns out there are 4 key things we need to think about. Okay, here they are, the 4 core elements. First, you've got contextual details. You know, the setting, the history, the background. Second, participant perspectives. What are the people involved actually saying and feeling? Third is the researcher's positioning, basically acknowledging that the person telling the story has a point of view that shapes it. And finally, and this is a big one, the cultural and social meanings, unpacking all those unspoken rules and the real significance of what's going on. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like a lot of work. So why is this depth so valuable? What's the big payoff for going thick? Trust me, the payoff is huge. A thick description makes your story way more credible. It also creates something called transferability, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. And crucially, it makes sure the voices of the people in the story are actually heard, which makes your entire analysis so much stronger. So, this idea of transferable, what does that even mean? Well, think of it like a recipe. A thin recipe just gives you a list of ingredients. A thick recipe tells you why you need to use high heat and what might happen if you swap out the flour. That rich context lets you take the core idea and actually use it in your own kitchen. That's transferability. It lets knowledge travel. All right, let's get practical. How can you actually apply this? How do you avoid that trap of thinness and start writing with real, authentic depth? Here are 4 really practical ways to start. First, don't just describe the action. Ask yourself, what did it mean? Second, when you use a quote from someone, ask, what was happening right then? What was the situation? Third, bring in sensory and social details. What did the room feel like? Who had the power? And finally, always look for what's not being said. What are the unspoken rules at play here? So, after all of that, what's the one big idea we really need to hang on to? Let's bring it all home. The final takeaway is really a shift in mindset. We're not just collecting isolated stories or random facts. The real goal is to build meaning-rich interpretations. It's about connecting the dots, seeing the bigger picture, and revealing the why that's always hiding just beneath the surface of the what. And that brings us to my final question. And this one's for you.
Think about some event from your own life. An argument, a party, a simple conversation. How would you tell it thinly? Now, how would you tell it thickly? What thin story in your own life deserves a thicker description?